Welcome back, everyone, to After the Roll, The Legend of Vox Machina, the show where we break down each episode of Legend of Vox Machina. Tonight we're breaking down Season 2, Episode 6, Into Rhymecleft. I am one of your hosts, Travis J. Crokin, and I'm being joined by my fellow co-host, Billy. How are you tonight?
Oh, you know what? I'm doing great now that I have a camera and microphone that are working.
It's been a thing of having to reset systems this week. I don't know what it is. So how excited are you to talk about this episode?
Very excited to talk about this episode. I'm always excited to talk about Vox Machina. This has been a passion of mine since I was trying to convince you and LJ that this is what we should do for a season. And here we are. I still enjoy it every week.
I am thrilled that you did convince us to do this. So let's get started like we normally do. This is the cocktail. It doesn't quite look the way it's supposed to because it's been sat out for a while. But you can still see there's some kind of swirls going on in there, some different colors. But this cocktail tonight that we designed for Into Rhymecleft is called Love and Loss. So what it says is, hey, welcome Draxel. The first thing I noticed about this episode was a strong color theme and the visually stunning battle scene with the Sphinx. In designing this cocktail, I wanted to capture the feeling of love and loss and the majesty of the galaxy colors when Vox Machina and the Sphinx face off. The shimmering cocktail has magical color-changing properties that you can take on a voyage deep into the universe of love and loss. The flavor is gentle with a warm embrace and intoxicating floral aroma, with a color and shimmering swirl leaving you wishing it could last forever. This cocktail has a lingering aftertaste that breaks your heart when it's over. Stir up the magic and float through the cosmos as you watch Episode 6 of The Legend of Vox Machina. So let's see how we make this. Welcome back to another Legend of Vox Machina inspired literary cocktail. This one is for Season 2, Episode 6, Into Rhymecleft, and the title of this cocktail is Love and Loss. This cocktail was designed based around the color scheme and the feel and overall theme of this episode. So let's jump into this. For this to start off with, we're going to need some special vodka. This is pea berry infused vodka. 2 ounces of this. I will be posting on my website how to make the pea berry infused vodka sometime this week. So we have 2 ounces of that. So you can see this starts off as a nice dark blue color, almost indigo. Then we add in 3/4 of an ounce of Lillet Blanc. It's a white wine. And then we're going to add 1/2 ounce of Saint Germain elderflower liqueur. And just like that, you can automatically see that the color of this is now faded to a nice purple tone. So already we're changing color in our cocktail. Then we need some pearl luster dust, just a couple of shakes in there. You don't want too much. A little bit does go a long way. And the same thing with the rose water. A little bit goes a very long way. A splash of rose water, just like that. Then we're going to give this a quick stir. There we go. Now, having stirred that, the aromas really start popping out in this. And you can see now that there's actually a bit of a swirly luster purple effect and kind of a glittery effect that's taken off on this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this and we're going to strain it into our rocks glass that already has a king cube of ice in it. So we're going to take that out and we're going to strain this. There we go. And you can still see the swirly, beautiful luster that we have in there of the pearl luster. And now we're actually going to take 1/2 ounce of our homemade lemon syrup. I'll be putting the recipe for this up as well. So pour 1/2 ounce of that in here. And there we are. And now for the magical effect on this. We are now going to take some magic ice, which is again pea flower infused ice. We're going to scoop this on top. There we go. And we are going to add our pea flower, or we're going to add our lemon syrup on top. And that gives us this beautiful color changing effect. We can see blue and purple and swirling luster color in there. Give that another quick spin with the spoon just to get that amalgamated. And there we have Love and Loss, purple, blue, pink, a lovely color to this, lovely rose scent to it. Nice and chilled, absolutely gorgeous. This drink exemplifies Love and Lost as we've seen in this episode. I hope you enjoy Season 2, Episode 6 of The Legend of Vox Machina. I hope you continue to enjoy these fantastic, magical cocktails that we are developing for the show. And as always, my friends, cheers, and I'll catch you again next time. And there we have Love and Loss, our cocktail. So, my question, as I always have, fitting cocktail for this episode?
Very much. I think that once we get into it, it will make a lot of sense. It's a beautiful drink. That is a gorgeous drink. I could really see myself enjoying just holding it, like being at a party, being like, "Hey, look what I got."
Yeah, it is. That's what I wanted. I wanted a galaxy in a glass.
Yeah,
and it's what we achieved. It turned out pretty well. So, with all of that being said, let's dive in to Rhymcleft, and see what this is all about. So, yes, welcome to Draxel. First time chat coming through. Thank you for coming in. Really appreciate it. Hello, Prefect. All right, hello, Green Giant. Welcome. And Prefect, thanks for coming by. I understand you have to take off. Thank you very much for coming through. So, let's take a look at this one. This one had quite the cold open for Into Rhymcleft.
sure did.
A little more aggressive. This is kind of reminding me of the slopes of Mount Doom from the Wheel of Time, that amazing cold open that they had. Not the slopes of Mount Doom, but the slopes of the mountains where that's happening. But anyways, in this episode of Vox Machina, starts off with Grog in a gladiatorial arena slaughtering people. I think it's the only way you can describe it, is a slaughter.
Yeah, there's bodies piling up around him. There's like heads all over the place. He's got thousands upon thousands of like screaming, cheering fans. Many of them also look to be Goliaths. They're chanting Grog, 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 and he is eating it up.
Oh yeah, he is right in the middle of it. He is, I put down glory. He is in his glory with this. And then in the midst of all the glory, he spins around and he suddenly has Pike, for lack of a better term, skewered on the end of his sword.
Yeah, and as he continues to look, he also sees the rest of his friends in various forms of disarray, bloody, pulpy disarray.
And all dead. And then he turns around, and then there's another Goliath standing in the distance that says, "You've made the herd proud." And he wakes up with a scream, sees all of his friends are still there, and then the sword has the ominous "more, give me more blood." And that was the end of the cold open. It was quite the it was a very shocking cold open for this. Like, we see Grog in a way that we normally don't see him. Like, we see him rage in the battle, but this was a different rage. This was a bloodlust.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe it as well. And when we wake up, we see him in literal fear, which is also something we don't see him in very often. So
yeah,
he's usually the one that's headlong into battle, not the one that screams from a nightmare waking up.
Exactly. But again, because they're so good at the pacing, they start literally by grabbing you by the throat in this episode. And then we go into the after the cold open, after the credits, they're walking through the mountains, they're trying to find Rhymcleft. And this is the initial part that I saw that there was a color scheme in this episode. The entire, as Walk Through the Mountains, had a pinkish, purplish hue filter over the entire scene as they were walking in. And then the blues were used as well on the ruins as we get there. But there really was this, for the beginning to almost the end, there really was this kind of overall theme and feel of color that they had in this episode.
Yeah, and like we've talked about time and time again with this show, they never do anything on accident. So
Yeah.
There's a reason why we have this color scheme and this filter over everything as we move forward.
Exactly, and it ties in. And it was entirely, they did it so I can make this cocktail, is the reason why
Exactly.
they did that color
They
scheme.
knew.
Yeah, exactly. But we do have, and then we go from being gripped at the very beginning with this violent, really bloodthirsty start to the show, and then walking through the mountains, Grog yawns, and then Vex is like, not enough sleep, and he's like, no, fantastic sleep. Definitely no bad dreams of everyone dying horribly. I'm good. It's awesome. So we actually get to see Grog now in this episode and in this scene, kind of on his back foot a little bit. Like we don't see Grog scrambling to try to find excuses and lies very often, if at all, up to this point. But like really nice dreams, and then the sword is still saying, "I hunger, feed me," and he kind of reacts to it. Like the sword is getting a lot more invested in what's happening and a lot more demanding. But then we see Scanlan and Pike. And this is an interesting thing because as they're walking, Pike looks at Scanlan and says, have you noticed anything weird with Grog and the sword? And then Scanlan spins off and does this little song and dance. Like, well, you can't blame a guy for playing with a sword. And she gets exasperated and is like, why can't you be serious or sincere in any moment? I think she actually says, because I put it down here, before we get to that, but she does say, why can't you be sincere about anything? But before they get to that question, is they walk up, because Grog is talking to the sword, and they walk up, and they're like, hey, buddy, what's going on? Like, who are you talking to? And it's like, oh, the tree, Keyleth taught me. Yep, good luck with the termite tree. And goes off. And again, so this, like, really having to think quick, which is kind of hard for Grog, and belay the suspicions of his friends, and is also not just that, he's shook from this nightmare, right? He's by himself, even though he's surrounded by all of Vox Machina.
Yeah, there's definitely a loneliness to his fear in all of this, because he doesn't like what he saw. He doesn't want that to happen, and now he's really edgy about what the dream could mean, and that's making him kind of fold in on himself, make excuses, be very un-Grog-like. And I think it's interesting. We've discussed before this point that we were concerned why someone like Pike, who is the closest to Grog, hasn't really taken it upon herself to figure out what's going on. There's been probably 3 or 4 times now that she's like had the moment of thinking, going, something's weird here, and there's a distraction or a battle or something happens that she doesn't get the chance to. And this is the first time we see her actually get a chance to be like, hey, you're acting weird, man.
Yeah, and his first response is to blow it off, be like, nope, talking to the trees, I'm done, I'm out, and he walks away. And then that's where she does have this thing where she's like, Scanlan, have you noticed anything weird? Like, she's actually starting to be concerned enough to the point that she's recruiting help. What's happening with Grog? Have you noticed anything? And then Scanlan is Scanlan for himself. And that's what I've noticed a big part of this, the other underlying theme in this episode, and we're going to see this in multiple plays as we go through, but it's relationships. Mm-hmm. We see great relationship development with Scanlan and Pike. We see great relationship development with Keyleth and Vax. And there's relationships come up in other ways as well. But there's just a lot of interpersonal connectedness and relationships and conversations that are had within this episode, I found.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. But then it goes to Keyleth and Vax and Keyleth is like, oh, you've got, like, are you getting used to your armor? And in this, I found this whole scene kind of interesting because Vax was, I don't know if I want to say that he was a jerk up until the end of it, but he's very cold, very snappy. As we discussed in previous episodes, Vax is not himself. He's distant, he's in his head, and he's kind of being a dick to everybody. Mm-hmm. Hey, Atenshi, welcome. And so his response back is, well, it's kind of hard to get used to a relic from the goddess of death. And she's like, well, yeah, but you've got it. Maybe you can ask her for help. And his response basically is like, yeah, asking Mistress and Ravens for help, doubt it's going to happen. And so it's kind of like this cutting way he's responding back to her. And then Keyleth says, well, at least you could try. And then Vax softens everything with a bit of a smile as they're walking. What did you think about that exchange between the two of them?
So I think the important thing was literally that line, at least you could do is try. Because I think it wasn't, as much as it was about the direct conversation that they were having, I think it was also, underlying. You could try not to be a dick.
Yeah.
You could try to talk to some of us. We'll listen, and that's what leads to the smile and stuff. And I think it worked out good. I think it was good characterization, because if Vax continued in that like dickhead kind of way, I don't know what would happen to him. Like he's gonna end up hiding in a tree and
Yeah, just completely pulling it on himself. But again, there's a lot of this up to this point in the season. There's a lot of people not knowing what's happening with them. Grog with the sword, him with the vestige, all of these things happening where they don't quite understand. Even Scanlan is like becoming hyper retrospective.
Yep.
Or introspective, which is something that we don't normally see introspection from Scanlan, being able to stop or being willing to pause and kind of reflect on who he is and how he is and why he is. And normally when Pike would make a comment like, can't you ever be sincere, he would blow it off and make some other kind of joke. But he actually had this pause where he was like, shit. Okay. And kind of went on from there. And then we see that they are being watched by a very familiar, although arguably exceedingly small form. The form was too small to match what it is following them. Did you pick up on that as well?
I did. But I didn't read too much into it at the time.
I'm not reading much into it, but at first, because I saw it, I'm like, oh, that looks like, I'm like, no, but it's like the size of a deer.
Yeah.
From the perspective they did, it looked like it was the size of a deer. But I mean, that could have just been a forced perspective or a weird thing in how they did it. But anyways, they're being watched as they're trying to take their trek. And they finally approach an area of the mountains where they can look and they can finally see Rhymecleft. And then it's just cold, it's frozen. Vax has this thing, is like, it's hard to believe we're going to find a Sphinx or anybody in this kind of frozen hellscape. And then we start off with this whole thing of like, it's cold. Like Keela starts in on, actually, all of these mountain ranges are cold except for Pyra. There's a thing behind it. And then Scanlan jumps in. He's like, my balls are ice cubes. Can we save story time for when we're around somewhere warm and not when we're freezing on a mountain? But then we actually have a reminder back to Vex, where she's like, I'm cold as a corpse. That's not something I would like to repeat again.
Yeah, and considering Vax's discomfort right now, and bad joke, too soon.
Too soon, but I think that again, and to me, I took that as a thing of her battling with herself. Like, that's something that it's easy to kind of remember, or to just think like, oh yeah, she died, she was brought back, it's cool. But now every little bit is now the second or third time that she's reflected back on or brought back up the point that, guys, I was dead and now I'm back. And it's like, so she's like making a little offhanded quip, but I think it's her trying to reconcile the fact of what happened. And she's still kind of trying to wrap her head around all of this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I like the fact that they're showing that this character is going through this kind of mental struggle, although she's handling it better than some would, I think.
Yeah.
I'm glad that she's having those moments. It shows the, life in her, the realization that she was gone.
Exactly. And that's traumatizing. And that's the thing, is that they really do a good job in the show of showing that there's consequences to things that have occurred and people were trying to work through issues and things like that. But I also like the fact that they don't hit you over the head with it. And it's like in that little comment of, I'm as cold as a corpse, not an experience I would like to repeat again, is something that you can take at face value and be like, haha, funny quip, and move on and ignore it. Or you can dig down a little bit into it and be like, oh wow, she's actually really hurting from this. She's still trying to dig through this. So they don't hit you over the head bluntly with the trauma that people are dealing with and how they're dealing with it, but they are actually framing it there that if you want to look into it, you can. And if you want to just slide along and enjoy the episode, you can do that as well, which is great. But then we also see another, again, going back to relationships, when she says that she's cold as a corpse, Percy takes his jacket off, gives it to her. It's not running down his nose. And he's like, I'm fine. Don't eat it. And that I put down here, just a big guilt with question mark of, is it because they're starting to get closer and this is him kind of like being chivalrous with her and trying to give her his jacket? Or is this kind of like, yeah, you were a corpse, it was my fault. Here, take my jacket. I'm no matter how cold I am, it's not going to suck as much as what you went through because of me.
Yeah, being cold is not gonna it comes nowhere close to being dead.
Exactly. So there's definitely some kind of guilt. But again, we see Percy trying to fight with his. And the fact that he doesn't look at her when he gives her the jacket, he stares steadfast forward, sniffs because he's cold and like everything is running. And he's kind of like stiff upper lip kind of thing, chin up, looking forward, not making eye contact. It shows that he's, again, like they do such a good job at just dealing with inner turmoil and tension and the interpersonal relationships, especially in this season. They're really hitting the nail on the head for it, in my opinion. And then Keyleth makes fire, which is, again, just a nice little throwback to the last episode, where she's not struggling, she's not having the battle, she just tosses up fire, and she kind of keeps everyone warm.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then we have Grog being Grog. But again, I think it's kind of a thing of Grog knowing, because he's alone with Pike. And she has now twice tried to needle him on the sword. And so his immediate response is, I like the cold, my nipples are tingly. And then starts walking forward. And she tries to ask him again. And there's this amazing scene where he grabs Scanlan, scoops him up into a baby Bjorn, and like ties him up. And as Keyleth tries to... Or as Pike tries to ask him about the sword again, he's like, oh, do you want a bouncy? And he bouncy, and he runs over. He literally kind of jogs off with Scanlan to avoid the question. So we know now that Grog is aware that Pike knows there's something going on. So this is, again, going back to the relationship aspect where he's kind of taking that love and affection that he has for the gnome, for Pike, and he's giving it to Scanlan. And he's not trying to hurt Pike, but he's trying to, I think, still express his love in general. And he's bringing in Scanlan. He's running away with it. And he's literally running away from the question, from the problem, because he does not want to face the possible consequences coming from it. So we actually see Grog, for the first time, for lack of a better term, somewhat abandoning Pike, because he does not want to be near her.
She knows too much already.
Yeah. But what is that? What's your takeaway from that whole scene? When he bounces Scanlan away, and that whole, like, that scene, we really saw kind of a rapid fire of all the characters and who they are, what they're going through, and what their mental state is at the moment.
Sure. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with all of them. The only one that I would also throw into the talk is Scanlan himself, who is often the comic relief in all of these scenes. You know, he starts the comic relief at the end of the last scene talking about his balls being froze. And now he's obviously cold and he needs his, baby Bjorn to be kept warm. But he protests at first. This is not what he wanted to be thrown into, a little chest pocket of Grog. He ultimately gives in, but I think this is another instance of the party disrespecting him in a way that's doubting him, disrespecting him. This has been a constant thing since the beginning of season 1. The party is always doubting Scanlan, even during his moments of clarity, even when he's not being just funny. They don't trust him to get his jobs done.
Yeah.
So...
And they don't take him serious. They don't see any seriousness about him at all in any way, shape, or form. And
thus, he's baby Bjorn.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that's a really good point to bring up with that. And I think this again comes down to the whole thing of sincerity. And now they are, like we discussed, now they are Vox Machina. They're not a ragtag group of people that have been thrown together. They've defeated dragons, they've defeated vampires, they've done all this crazy stuff. They are the heroes of the realm. And they are a team, and I think Scanlan's now starting to realize, like, hey, I'm not. This isn't me. And I don't think he knows how to deal with it in any way. And then we see that there's a raven or a crow watching. It's kind of hard to tell from the animation, but a raven or a crow.
I just assume they're all ravens now.
Yeah, exactly. Watching them go through. And then they come up to a bunch of pillars or obelisks sticking out of the ground. And we have a moment of refreshing return to the old Percy, where he walks up and he's like, I might be able to read some of this, because he's noble and he's read all these books and stuff like that. And they see, amidst the dead bodies and skeletons frozen to the ground, it says, flee from this land, danger comes from paradise. And that's where Pike's like, I mean, the heavens, the air kind of thing. And immediately, Vex jumps onto the broom and flies up to investigate.
And I like the the quote, very cryptic message, sounds sphinxy.
And I guess we also get a little bit of regular Vax. Because when Percy comes in, he's like, I might be able to read some of this. And Vax is like, yeah, of course you can. Why are we not surprised? But there's this beautiful scene where you actually see Vex flying through, and she just says Valentia.
It's gorgeous.
And just, again, this is where we see kind of the blues coming through and stuff. And like the color scheme is absolutely gorgeous. She flies through the pillars, and she finally realizes that she needs a different angle of perspective. And that shows the hidden doorway in the mountain. And then she flies down. They walk up to it, and it's a stone wall. But she walks through, and they follow, and they enter in to the frozen temple of the Sphinx. And that's where everything changes.
She walks in, and it's like, hey, anyone coming with me?
Yeah. Did you not see what just happened? But they go in, it's a beautiful frozen temple. It's absolutely, again, the design, the architectural design and stuff they have in this show is absolutely astounding. I love it. But then they immediately get attacked by a Sphinx, and he's circling around kind of the way Osisa did, and then he dives through the air, and that's when Vex is like, Osisa sent us, and he pauses. And I have to say, Osisa was like a cool kind of looking Sphinx.
Yeah.
This was a Sphinx.
Yeah.
Kameljori was a Sphinx. Like, it was, when you think of a Sphinx, he's big, powerful, muscular, dominating kind of presence.
Yeah, I mean, so I really talked up the character design of Osisa, and then you get to Kameljori, and you're just like, wow, they really, like, creature design is like on par with all of their like nature design and everything else. The animation's just gorgeous.
Yeah, they really hit the nail on the head with this as they go through. But so when they get all this happens, and then they actually at some point too, before they fully get attacked, they say, what is this place? And then Vex is like, oh, it's a temple. Like, oh, it's a really old one. He's like, no, this was like ancient, like before the cataclysm between the humans and the gods. Like, this is really old. And then I think it's Vex is like, how do you know this stuff? And he's like, I don't know. And then of course we get the glisten of the armor with the gold frame. We're like, yeah, that's the armor. But it shows again another level of powers that he's getting. Mm-hmm. Right, he's understanding. Yeah, he's getting understanding and kind of the memories, and I think that's some of the flashes that we're seeing is some of the memories that he has from this. Or it's a calamity between man and gods, and so then we actually get to learn a little bit more about Cam or Kameljori, and Cam says, "My mate sent you. I haven't seen her for centuries," and Scanlan again being Scanlan. So that's one thing I like about this is we're seeing movement, we're seeing change in all the characters, but we're also seeing a bit of a flicker of their old personalities. So if we talk about in writing, you advance your characters and you also have them slide back a little bit into their old ways. And that's when Scanlan's like confronted with this monolithic Sphinx that is like 1,000 times bigger than him. He's like, she wasn't with anyone else, just in case you're wondering. And it's like, in what part of your brain was that a good thing to say?
Right.
Right.
Why did you bring that up?
Like, it was weird. It was uncomfortable. And then Cam kind of skips over it and says, you have to go through a challenge. And Percy, again, is kind of like, yeah, of course. We're expecting this. And I got to say, the challenges all sounded kind of dope. I want to see them all played out.
I know, right?
Right? It was defeat the 70 Death Gorgons, go through the endless labyrinth of misery, and hurt me were the options.
I think hurt me was the most boring one.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's, for me, if someone gives me those options, I agree with Grog. The 70 Death Gorgons sound cool as fuck. Like, jump in and do that. But if someone's like, I can, like, for $1 million, you can go, like, swim across the Atlantic Ocean, you can trek all the way across America barefoot, or you can eat this hot dog. I'm going to be second guessing that hot dog.
Yeah, I'm not eating that hot dog.
Like, there's something, like, right? And Scanlan was the one that had that thing where they were talking about this and like, what should we do? and Grog wants to do the Gorgons, and they're all going through different things, and then they're like, oh, we should use to hurt him. We should hurt him. And Scanlan's like, come on. This guy is older than time. He's never poked his eye, never stubbed his toe, never had a pimple on his peen, like, never been hurt, and you all think that we're going to hurt him.
That's the choice you're going with.
Yeah. So again, Scanlan is the one who's no one takes seriously. He's the one that's kind of like, guys, this is ridiculous. Like, there's obviously this is a trap.
And then we find out that the poor Death Gorgons were itching for a fight.
Yes, they've been dying for a fight and just not happening. So they go for it because they have the conversation. Like, we don't have to kill him. We just have to wound him. Like, any one of us should be able to at least land one blow as we go along. And then they're transported to the other realm or another dimension, which is basically where this cocktail is designed to represent that dimension that they were in. But then they decide, so they have to go one by one. They can attempt to attack him and hurt him. And Scanlan says, why don't we send Vex in first? And then Vex obviously takes issue to that and says, no, I'm going to go first. I'm not going to let anything else happen to you. And he goes up and gets his ass handed to him pretty quickly. But just before he goes up, we actually see Grog is standing there. And then the Craven Edge starts in again. Feed me. More. I'm hungry. And Grog steps aside behind a stone pillar. And he's like, I can't feed you. And then that's the first time that Craven Edge actually threatens Grog.
Yeah, he's getting real demanding. And apparently, if Grog isn't giving him what he wants, he can feed off Grog. Like, just straight up feed off of him.
Yeah. So what does Grog do? Feeds him with himself. Which, again, I'm looking at this, I'm like, dude, you're about to battle a Sphinx. Why are you cutting your hand open? Like, come on.
I mean, if he didn't, and the Craven Edge just took all of his muscles, would have been in the same boat anyway. So.
Yeah, probably worse. But, so he cuts himself to feed the blade, and then Vax goes running up and gets blasted just into oblivion. His blades, his speed, nothing is happening. And Vex yells out, what have you done to my brother? And this is where we learn that he's still alive, but unless the stakes are much higher than you're not going to get what you're looking for, or I'm going to kill you, is you're going to fall through a void for eternity if you don't succeed.
That's tough. That's a tough thing to swallow.
Yeah. And of course my brain started, I'm like, would you get hungry? Like, what happens? Like, are you hungry? Do you still need, like, if you're falling through a void for eternity, does, like, everything just stop? Or are you, because you're going to starve to death at some point, unless punishment means that you're not starving to death, which means you wouldn't get hungry. I went down a rabbit hole with this one. I really did.
It's a good rabbit hole. Just before Vax gets thrown into his oblivion, too, we also get a really quick back and forth with Cam and Vax talking about the Raven's mantle that he's wearing.
Yes.
Where Cam is very easily recognizes it and goes, "Oh, you're the Death Maiden's champion." And Vax tries to get information, and Cam basically just says, "It's hard. It's hard to be the champion." And then Vax says, "Well, die. I'm done with you."
Yeah, but you're not gonna have to worry about that because you're not gonna be a champion for much longer. So he gets blasted away, and then Vex jumps in, and this is where we again get to see that being a jerk to people is not just like Osisa. It was actually just the way the Sphinx are, because he's like, "Oh, look at you," and Vex runs up, the one with no family that actually cares for you anymore. And it's the psychological attacks as they're trying to fight. And he's, to be fair, for those of you that have seen the episode, he's not fighting. He's just standing there. And they're coming at him, bouncing off this like force field that he has. And he's just like hurling insults at them and like screwing with them psychologically, giving them a final thought before they're falling into the void forever to think about.
Yeah, and then he just kind of pushes them off the edge. And that's that.
Yeah. And
like
they're
fly.
going. And that platform thing is really cool too.
It's really cool, yeah.
Yeah. And then Grog doesn't do anything. Like, Grog just runs in a frenzy, and he just goes berserker on him, rage, tries attacking, and then again, Kamal says, "Look at you. Like, it's obvious you don't know where your strength comes from." And Grog is like, "What?" He's thrown.
And then it's just blasted off, and it's just so humorous because everyone keeps saying this to him.
Exactly. And then it's, again, if you think about it, that's the final thing that's put in your head before you fall for eternity through the void. And that's like, can you imagine poor Grog, the eternity trying to think of what the hell people are trying to say?
Oh,
and I don't think that would be enough time for him to get to it.
Nope.
On his own. Now, the next part of this kind of surprised me because Keyleth was like, you know what, fuck the rules. We're all going to rush him, see what happens. So my immediate thought with that was, if you do land a hit and you've broken the rules, does it count?
So I did not like or agree with this part. Like, I mean, it is in character. I believe 100% that any group of Vox Machina would break off and decide to break the rules and attack a 3-on-1. But this group having Keyleth and Pike in it and doing that, and also the Sphinx just thinking it's interesting and not being like, hey, you're breaking the rules.
Yeah.
Or like stopping them from doing it. I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. What are we doing here?
But I think it kind of shows how confident the Sphinx is, though. He's like, yeah, you're breaking the rule, whatever. It doesn't, like, oh, 3 of you at once. All right. Like, like, ooh. But yeah, that was the thing where I'm like, because again, I was expecting a response from the Sphinx.
Yeah.
And there was nothing. It was just kind of like, oh, how interesting.
How interesting. Goodbye.
Yeah, that knocks them all off. But there is a thing with that, though, where they're about to run up, and Scanlan grabs Pike's hand. And he's like, there's got to be another way. And she gives him this, like, solid look of disgust and disdain. Of, like, you can't be serious, you can't be sincere, like, you can't even with this. And she pulls her hand away and she runs in. And there was just that moment, that look that she gave him, where I was kind of like, that's not just like, oh, Scanlan. That was kind of like, what the hell's wrong with you? And then she ran in.
It was withering. It was just soul freezing.
Yeah. It was harsh. It was really a rough kind of look. And then Scanlan hides and gets blasted by it's like, maybe I won't get found. The rock gets blasted. He almost gets knocked off. And then again, he's attacked with the same line of reasoning, the same logic, where the cam says, you know, here's this one, all jokes and no heart. How did you ever convince Osisa to put your trust? Old School 1988, thank you for the follow. Greatly appreciated. Welcome to the writer's chat. Greatly appreciated. So, and he has this thing where, again, he's being questioned as to whether or not his sincerity, his, like, no heart. It's just jokes, cracking jokes all the time. And at that moment, when he says Osisa, is when Scanlan's like, sincerity. Hold on a second. Let me give you a moment of utmost sincerity. And then jumps in and starts playing this absolutely gorgeous song. Just one quick second. Hey, Cruz, I see that. I haven't seen it yet. We're not talking about that show right now, but we can talk about that at another time. But I haven't seen it yet, no. But so we have this absolute moment of sincerity in this thing. And so Cam stops and pauses, and Scanlan breaks into this absolutely gorgeous song.
He does. So I am going to be the villain here and say I didn't really like this. I liked the song was fine. I think that injuring him with memories of Osisa was good, but I felt like this was kind of projected this entire fight. Like I was just waiting for the part where Scanlan was going to sing the song to wound the Sphinx, because obviously that was what had to happen. Yeah. Obviously he wasn't going to just get hit by Grog. So it seemed too easy to me. But that being said, the visuals were amazing. The song was really good. Like, I loved the presentation. This was one of the few points where I just wasn't surprised. And I was just kind of like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of saw it. When the bard is left, that's the only thing that's going to kind of happen. And even the setup with, he was like, there's got to be another way. Like, there's you can see that that's kind of foreshadowing. Hey, LJ, welcome.
Hey,
Welcome.
LJ.
Nice to see you. One thing I did like about it though, and I noticed on my like eighth watch through again, because there's multiple reasons why I had to watch this episode many times, and one of the things with it was at the end of the song. So for those of you that don't know, Scanlan plays a song, and then a pink outlined version of Osisa shows up and starts dancing, and then the Sphinx Cam becomes the outline, and they start dancing in choreography with each other and stuff. But then they put their heads together, and as they put their foreheads together, just as Osisa fades away and kind of blows backwards, she's actually crying. And the tears get caught, and the tears get pulled back and fade back with her. And I thought it was just a really nice touch that they added in to that scene with that. But then he comes down and says, you've done what no one has been able to do in Eon, my entire life. You have hurt me. And so they win. And then then they have this kind of heart-to-heart, where he's like, you must know true love to be able to do this. You're so intelligent and wise and wonderful. And Scanlan's like, oh, yeah, like guys, girls, everyone in between is like, I've got... And then we actually do have that moment of sincerity with Scanlan.
Yeah,
Like,
and I think this was the best part of this whole scene, was we finally get to see that sincerity. And no one else gets to witness it.
Yeah, exactly, right? The most we've ever seen of Scanlan, like actually admitting to himself who he is. When it's about... Yeah, it was very telegraphed. But then, so we do have that. And then we have the rest of the group show up. Yeah, exactly. You can't be sincere when people might be watching. But then you have the rest of the group show up. And they're like, how did this happen? And then they look up and Grog's like, what the fuck? And they walk up closer. And Cam is like, this is the most intelligent, wise sage I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, this is amazing. And then the entire like, what the fuck? It was just, and that, again, talking about pacing, talking about rhythm and flow, really good. Like this insane battle scene, this really moving, touching moment, this touching moment, smaller touching moment with Scanlan, and then everything back to being like, no, okay, you're either drunk or you got the wrong guy. Like,
Yeah.
What the hell's happening here?
Yeah, I loved, and we didn't get to see very much of it because everyone came back, but I loved that their relationship just like became such a thing after this song and this talk. Like they're just chilling together. Scanlan's like kind of snuggled up to him and they're chatting.
His tail wrapped around him.
It was just so cute.
Maybe you gotta stop looking for love. Let love come to you. It's like, yeah, I never thought of that. But yeah, it's like they really are like, and in fact, it was like, oh, Cammy and I are good friends now. Like it's really, but they do really show that in the brief little period coming afterwards. They really show how close they came quickly. But it also shows who Tomoljori is, because when they come up, he's like this deep voice and impending and being shadowy and scary and stuff. And he's like, sorry about before, guys, formalities, red tape bullshit. Nice to meet you. How you doing? And he's really chilling, kind of nice with them. So it shows like actually like how they developed him for that part as well. And then Scanlan's like, hey, you came back just in time. He's about to show us the vestiges. And he says, no, you are. And he pulls out the myth carver and gives it to Scanlan. I love the fact that it adjusts the size to whoever's holding it.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And the fact that it's hollow in the middle.
It's the coolest sword I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I love it. I want to see that made in Forged in Fire. But then, and that was actually for the singing part. I think, I really liked the song that he did before. It was nice. It was like beautiful tone, sound, lyrics, all that stuff. But this moment when he holds up Myth Carver and sings like, Myth Carver, show me something good, sent chills down my spine. The animation, the glowing eyes, but just his voice that was the first time I've actually seen magic in Scanlan's voice.
It was so cool.
Yeah, it was, and it reminded me of something. I don't remember. It was an homage to something. I don't know what it is, but every time I've seen it, there is the tone, the lilt, and the way it rises up at the end is from something. It's a connection to something else.
Yeah,
but it was absolutely beautiful in that. And then we see in the Fey realm the bow, and we see in Restaurant the gauntlet. Now, when we see the bow, he immediately is like, yeah, Vex, awesome. This is a thing for you. Great. This is going to be good. And then we see the gauntlet. We actually have Grog, like he says, like there's a lot of guys that look like Grog. It's a city, kind of looks like Restaurant. And he's wearing this big gauntlet thing that's glowing. And that's where Grog's like, oh, probably not important, and kind of steps back. And this is where Pike snaps. And she's like, basically says, what the fuck is going on with you? She's like, what is wrong with you, Grog? There's something happening. Because he is acting so out of sorts. And Pike actually hits a breaking point.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been watching this build up and build up and build up this whole episode where Grog's been backtracking, but this is like the most clear that his backtracking and hiding has been, because he's like, I don't even want to listen to the rest of this. That's not important. We're done here. And Pike has that breakthrough, like we're talking about this right now.
Yeah. And what can possibly
it's
interfere
time.
with this conversation?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it would have to be something major that can stop us from having this conversation right here, right now.
And then what happens?
Umbrasyl! Welcome back. Comes crashing through the ceiling. And again, we see everyone runs, and then we actually have, if you look really quickly, Scanlan is still standing in front of Cam, and Cam uses his eye lasers and flings him out of the way before all the stones come crashing down. So you see there's an immediate like connection. It's not just like, oh, there are these people that came and I'm working with them now. It's like, no, he had this like immediate, almost like love for, I think because he touched his heart, because he connected him to Osisa, that he had this love of like, you know, I have to protect you. You brought me what I needed. And now that's this.
Yeah, there's an actual connection. They are chums now. There's no falseness to it.
Exactly.
Insincerity.
Exactly. And then Umbrasyl actually sees the blade and says, another relic. The woman was right.
Dun dun dun.
And then dives into the fray. And this, I didn't like. I was gonna be like take down like battle notes of like what it is. I'm like, this battle was insane.
Yeah, it was very fast paced, and this was one of those battles where I looked at the time beforehand because I was just curious where we were in the episode. And we were like a little bit over halfway, and by the time the battle was over and I checked again, I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe like 10 minutes went by. There was so much that happened.
Yeah, and we got like, if you paid attention, you got to see little flashes of like Keyleth as the tiger and everyone moving around, and like Vex saving Scanlan and all the stuff happening. But again, this insane battle raging between the dragon, Umbrasyl, and Kamaljori, the Sphinx. And actually, when they face off against each other, Umbrasyl actually says, like, shouldn't you be extinct? And then Cam says, not yet, Defiler, and steps on his head. And then they start fighting. But I mean, it's blood being drawn from everyone, like acid being shot, people being thrown. Like, Cam gets acid dripped on his face when Scanlan tries to stop him with a fist. And we actually get to see that they say, hit, like, Vox Machina is like, this is their chance, we got to jump in. Hit him where the Sphinx draws blood.
Yeah.
Right?
And we got Grog sucking up dragon blood with his blade. One of the things that I really liked about this, because we've been touching upon relationships building, is Vex saving Scanlan, because this was a relationship that really just started to blossom in the last episode with the whole magic broom. Why am I having such a hard time remembering what those are called? With the broomstick. Yeah, the flying stick. I don't know. With the whole magic word and their like agreement in the last episode, and then she saves him. Like, it's nice to see them continue to show that relationship is growing and that these relationships are growing.
Yep. And then she actually also says at one point, she says, now I'm getting the hang of this. As she's flying through, she's like, okay, cool. I got this now. Like, this is good. And she's really going nuts. And yeah, it's quite the sword, LJ. Craven Edge is quite the sword. I think she's talking about Craven Edge, not the Mythcarver.
Mythcarver's better, but
but then actually they're laying in Umbrasyl, like they're actually defeating him and impacting him. And Cam's got his head on him, like his hand on his paw on his head, and he's holding down. And then we have this enough moment where you knew that was coming. You knew Umbrasyl was toying to a certain point. He does the enough, bursts out of the rubble, and everyone is kind of in disarray right there, and he grabs Scanlan and Mythcarver in a pile of rock and flies off of them in his mouth. And then immediately Cam is after. He's like, "Oh no, that's my boy. He can't like,
Oh no.
yeah, that's not happening." And he blasts Scanlan out of the mouth. And then laser eyes, come on. It's amazing. Awesome.
He's got freaking lasers that come out of his eyes.
Exactly. And then there's this other battle, and you actually see that Cam talked about not getting hurt before. He's got blood dripping from him as he's falling. There's a train of blood trailing after him. And there's this gorgeous scene where he grabs Scanlan, wraps him in his wings, and then comes crashing down. And that was just a beautiful and tragic scene that they played out.
Yeah, it was really, it had me choked up, and I think beyond just the visualization of him like grabbing Scanlan and saving him, I think it was the thank you right after he crashes, after the group gets Scanlan out of Cammy's arms. Cammy, with his last breath, says, "Thank you for connecting me to Osissa again."
Yeah.
Right before he dies. And I was just like, ugh.
Yeah. So it may have been really forecasted, but they've got some gut punches, and we can't get into things later on, like the later episodes coming up, but there's some gut punches coming up in the season that, like, one actually almost brought me to tears near the end, where I was like, that's bullshit, but it's a thing. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyways, Umbrasyl flies in, grabs the vestige, and he's like, "This is mine now." And again, it grows back to a much larger size. He's holding it in his tail, and then he attacks. And he comes in for this massive attack. And as he attacks, Grog goes into this insane blood rage and bloodlust and just starts, like, single-handedly taking this dragon down.
Yeah. And doing an okay job.
Yeah.
Like, he's at least holding him at bay.
Yeah, and to a point, like, Grog is strong. But when you've got an entire dragon's tail come slamming down on you, and you're, like, in the midpoint of the tail, not at the thin tip, and he just, like, stands up and flings it off and starts attacking more, it's like, okay, this is, like, superhuman abilities, like, way beyond, or super Goliath abilities that he has, that he's dealing with. And that was in this scene that it kind of made me reflect back, and I was like, really, how strong was Silas? And how much of a prisoner was Silas? Was Silas as evil as he was, or is he also just beholden to Craven Edge? Or is he at the same tier as Craven Edge? Like, this really made me start thinking back. Not to mention that Silas was actually mentioned in this episode. Because as they're in the mountains, they're walking away, and he's like, remember when Grog is talking to Keyleth? He's like, remember when you melted the face off of Silas?
Yeah.
So they actually do bring it up. So that kind of brought this whole thing up. They were pretty awesome characters. But that brought that whole thing kind of up for me. But so they're fighting really hard, and that's when they realize that they need to get the hell out. They try to run. The cave entrances collapse down. I don't know if that's because they have trouble with doors or that's just the way it was written. And then they ask Keyleth, can you do something to get us out of here? Because when she's talking about the Fey Realm, they're like, can we get to the Fey Realm? And she's like, well, a shifting spell might do it, but I don't know. So, like, you have to try. You have to do something to get us out of here. And so she starts doing this thing. The battle is raging. Grog gets thrown clear through the cavern and jumps back into fight again because he's not Grog. He has basically at this point become Craven Edge. And then Pike runs in like, buddies, you got to stop. Like, we have to leave. And what happened?
Well, in his maniacal blood steroid rage, Grog clean puts Craven Edge through Pike. And you see all of her blood being soaked into the sword as she's kind of limply hanging in it. And Grog suddenly comes to his senses and is reliving the nightmare that he had and starts going, no.
Yeah, that's the buddies thing is actually, she's always referred to as buddies.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's more obvious in this because they really focus on their relationship a lot more.
Yeah.
So she uses it a lot more frequently. But yeah, so Grog actually pulls the blade out and he's like, what have I done? And he goes through this. And so the foreshadowing at the beginning, like this horrible bloody mess at the beginning, is at least partially come true.
Coming true, yeah.
And so they all run back. He grabs her up and they all run back to, like, Scanlan, Grog, and Pike run back into the magic ruin. The spell is about to be cast, and Umbrasyl swings his tail and disrupts the spell. And as they're flying through, they do a really cool, like, that teleportation thing was really cool, that the way they did it.
Yeah, it was.
And then we see Scanlan, Pike, and Grog disappear. And then the four of them land in this beautiful, weird, wild, wonderful realm. And they're kind of say, where the hell are we?
They do. And then they go, where the hell's Pike and Grog and Scanlan?
And in that, there was another thing where, again, we're talking about with them disrespecting Scanlan and not taking Scanlan serious. They land like, where are we? And then I think it's actually Vax. It's like, yes, and where's Pike and Grog and Scanlan? There's like a long delay.
There is
in
a noticeable delay.
Yeah, and then that other little runt that pisses us off too. Where's he? Kind of thing. And they bring in, and then did they actually say where they are, or is that just left? I don't recall.
Not now.
Yeah, they just leave it there. And then we fade to black, not knowing if Pike is alive, where everybody is, where Scanlan and Pike and Grog are, and it's this. They didn't stick to the buddy system. No, they didn't.
Or they did.
And that's the end of that episode. So overall, what are your thoughts overall on the episode?
I mean, I thought the episode was good. Like I have said a couple times, the season has been very strong. I haven't really felt like there's been weak episodes like there's been in season 1. I did think that some of this episode was telegraphed, which kind of makes it a lesser tier than some of my other favorite ones, but it wasn't bad. I liked it. I would give it like a 7.
Yeah, I like the colors, the concept, the theme. I really love the cocktail, and as we discussed, I think I hit the cocktail pretty well, nail on the head. For what we wanted for this, for Love and Loss, I think that was a good one for that.
Absolutely.
But we always have a thing of, we'll get to MVPs and stuff like that in a moment, but we always have this thing of like, what is your gripe with this episode? Is there something you don't like about this episode or whatever it is? I actually have one. I have a legitimate one. I'm excited. One.
Yes.
All these other ones, thank you, LJ. All these other ones, I've been like, yeah, well, if you really want to pick into it, I have a major gripe. And I'm also, in telling you my gripe, I'm also going to try to undercut it and explain it away, though I don't think that I can.
Okay.
And it comes back to the battle with Khel Moldari.
Okay.
Not because it's telegraphed. That is a problem. So, one of the challenges they have is hurt me. Never in my life have I been hurt. Never has anyone been able to hurt me at all point. So even Scanlan says he's never stubbed his toe, never poked his eye, never got an ingrown hair on his peen. He's never in his entire life been hurt. They go through this. They say it many, many times in many different ways. Never been hurt. I've never felt pain. You're the first person, or you're the first one to be able to hurt me. No one has ever hurt me. So they always go in, like they go really into this whole thing with it. So you're trying to tell me that in the catastrophe between the humans and the gods, Cam was not hurt. You're trying to tell me that after the catastrophe with the humans and the gods, that Cam and Osisa were separated and forced to live apart from each other. That didn't hurt him and didn't hurt his heart. And you're trying to tell me that when Umbrasyl flies in and says, aren't you supposed to be extinct? And he says, not yet, Defiler. And he steps on his head. They know each other, or they know of each other's species, and they have never crossed paths as an entire life with a dragon and got into a fight with a dragon. So at no point has Cam ever felt pain in his life. Now you could say that he didn't get hurt when they separated because it was for honorable reasons, and he was doing the right thing, so he just kind of squared his heart and went off and did his thing. Maybe he didn't fight in the human gods cataclysm. That happened. And maybe he's never battled a dragon. Maybe the sphinxes and dragons don't get along and they've never known each other. They've never actually met and fought into battle with each other. But just with the things that they put through and the fact that how badly he got messed up and killed by the dragon in the end. And you got to remember, Umbrasyl is super old, super ancient, super powerful. Yesteryear, he wasn't like that. He would have been easier to have been killed if they were fighting with each other. So for all of that, all of those reasons, and again, trying to explain it away, I, like LJ said, I kind of call bullshit on the whole thing of I have never been hurt. Because the thing that hurts him is the fact that he misses Osisa.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with LJ on this one. Although I think it's easy to take it at face value and be like, oh yeah, he's never been hurt. Like that's the whole point. I think that he's a sphinx. That's what he does. He speaks in riddles and does all this nonsense. It doesn't matter if he's actually been hurt before, because the goal is you guys can't hurt me.
Yeah.
So hurt me.
Yeah, but that was my thing with that, because I was like, because then he also says at one point, like, because then I thought, well, maybe he meant like no mortal has hurt him before.
Yeah, I considered that too.
So you're gonna be the first mortal to hurt me. But either way, I was like, okay, that's kind of a speed bump. If you're like, for me at least, as digging into it and looking into it, for me that was a speed bump in the story where you have like multiple times laid down that he's never been hurt, and then you represent at minimum 3 times where he has to have felt pain in the past.
Sure. So I also have a gripe that isn't about the telegraphing. And it's close to your gripe, but not the same. My problem is they literally couldn't touch Cam.
Yeah.
Like he had a force field. He was indestructible. They couldn't get anything onto him, but the dragon did. But they could make the dragon bleed. Easy.
Yeah.
And that's what bothered me, was if the power levels are so skewed here, then if they can't touch the Sphinx, they shouldn't be able to touch the dragon. If they can't touch the dragon, they get, like I was just like, what's going on here?
So I mean, it could come down to the fact that the Sphinx has this power of the shield, the dragon doesn't. But to that end, most of the time that they've hurt the dragon was because they went. That hasn't happened yet, has it? No. But because they attacked in a certain manner, and also because they're attacking where the Sphinx has already drawn blood. However, Grog, when he's in his mad rage, does stab the dragon a couple of times, and there are times where they injure the dragon as they're going along.
Yep.
So I agree with you on that. But with the shield, when Umbrasyl says enough, he actually blasts so much acid at Cam, it slams him against the wall that the shield shatters.
That is true.
And he doesn't have the shield anymore, and it's after that he draws blood.
Okay.
So they are fighting with each other. But again, I agree in the sense that, maybe 2 match powers facing off against each other are going to be able to counteract. Maybe the dragon doesn't have the shield or anything like that. But yeah, the Sphinx was definitely a much harder battle than the dragon was, because they, like you said, they couldn't get near him.
Right. I just felt like Cammy should have had. I'm not saying that Cammy should have won, regardless of the plot armor, but I just feel like it shouldn't have been as one-sided looking as it was.
Yeah.
Umbrasyl looked like he was dominating Cammy most of the time.
Yeah, and what I was thinking as well with that battle when Vox Machina is facing off against the Sphinx, it was a little. I love the battle. I love the beauty. Like the whole thing was really well done, but it was very much just one-dimensional. I've got a shield in front of me. Ping, 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 ping. Everyone's off.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to see the shield come down, or like Vax flick behind him really quick and throw a dagger behind where the shield isn't, and then just see the dagger bounce off his hide or something. And say, because again, like you said, they never hit him once. So if you can't hit something, you're just standing behind a shield. It's kind of like saying, okay, Billy, I'm going to give you $1 million if you can slap me right now. It's kind of an issue with that. You can't reach me, right?
Yep.
But so it would have been nice to see them at least break through the shield, push through the shield, land something that just doesn't draw blood, that doesn't hurt, but land something at some point. Yep. Because he seemed, when he was sitting with that beautiful scene where they actually, I kind of want that as a screensaver but the Cam looking out into the galaxy and Scanlan behind him, and he wraps his tail around him. It almost sounds like either stone or metallic as the tail wraps around. It's not like a fleshy thing. There's like actually like as it comes down around. So even if he didn't have the shield, they still wouldn't have gotten a lick in on him anyways.
A Sphinx-shaped transformer.
So yeah, so there's definitely some, again, nowhere near the issues that we had. But when I saw this, I was like, episode 6, season 1, where things started to fall apart for a little while. Don't let this repeat itself. So it kind of gave me some concern for the next episode as to whether or not it was going to fall apart or it was going to stay tight.
And this is also one of the stopping points where when this show is put out, they give you 3 episodes a week. So this was a stopping point where we watched this and then had to wait for the next set of episodes. So we had to sit here and think about this episode.
Yeah, that kind of sucked, actually. It was a really long week to go through, I gotta say. But yeah, there was a lot that went on in this one. So yeah, so there we both actually have legitimate gripes for this. And again, I don't think they're insane gripes, and I think they can technically, I think, get explained away, even if you go down with my gripe to the level of LJ being like, yeah, he was lying. Plain and simple. Bullshit. So that's why they didn't like it. That's why it didn't make sense, because it wasn't true.
Yeah.
So we have that. What are your thoughts on MVPs?
My thoughts on MVPs. So I'm probably going to be really boring this week. I think that Scanlan is the MVP. I think the real MVP is Cammy. He looked cool. He had Mythcarver. He fought off Umbrasyl. He died heroically. He's the real MVP. Scanlan's my MVP because not only did he win the battle against the Sphinx, but he also had to just deal with so many put downs this episode, like being put in the baby Bjorn and everyone ignoring him when he said that we shouldn't be doing the hurt the Sphinx challenge. And I think that he put up with a lot and still came out on top, and that's why I give him MVP.
Yeah, and he really put himself on the line for a lot of this stuff, and that's a good perspective on that. I agree. Cam is freaking amazing. Just the design was absolutely gorgeous. If I were to get a tattoo of a Sphinx, it would be that.
That's it. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Ooh, that's such a good idea.
Have a great night, LJ. Thanks for coming through. Enjoy your dinner. So I would actually say, again, my heart MVP would be Cam, because I think he was just so fantastic and so beautiful for it. And for the MVP of the show, I mean, I played around with ideas with Keyleth showing her powers and zipping everyone away at the last minute. I'm not going to put the blame on her that the spell got screwed up because they were hit by a dragon tail as they were zipping away. And then there was also, I thought about the idea possibly of Vex, because she's the one that found the doorway. She was out of the box thinking, and she was really kind of there for Scanlan and pulling things together. Getting comfortable with the broom. And I would say in the end, my MVP would again actually be with Scanlan. We see him with the most introspection and reflection going through. We see him for the first time actually have some actual personal growth, not just growth as a character. We actually have personal growth with him. Yep. And there's a lot of duality in this, where he's well, let me give you a moment of pure sincerity. And he's doing that in his way of manipulating the Sphinx. But then there actually is that moment of pure sincerity that he has. Yeah. And all of these things where he kind of reflects in on himself and the growth that he had, again, with the relationship with him and Grog and him and Pike and all these things moving forward. I think Scanlan was definitely the one. And again, he saved everyone's ass. He's the one that came, whether it was foreshadowed or not, he came up with the idea that saved everybody else, pulled everyone out of the fire or the void. And and again, they didn't do a insane jump in personality like they did with Pike in season 1, because even when they come back and he has this moment of sincerity and you're wow, is this a turning point for Scanlan? Is he going to be more serious? Then we see him leaning against Cam, and he's like, "What rhymes with your eyes?" And he's like, or what rhymes with whatever. He's like, "Hey, nice eyes, or nice thighs, you'll touch me." And I'm like, okay, like that. Scanlan's back.
That's
They didn't
Scanlan.
like make him this like, oh, I can't make crude jokes anymore because I'm a manager now. Like, it's they can't.
Yeah.
They brought him up and kept him still at a level that's reasonable for his character.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would give that. I think again one of the reasons why this was one of my favorite episodes was like I said, even with the foreshadowing and the issues with the fight and that kind of thing, it was just beautiful. This is one of the first episodes I think where they've actually done a color scheme from almost from start to finish, where we had this color scheme of the pinks and the blues and the nice gentle like galaxy kind of colors, universal colors, and they really also bookended with the stabbing of Pike, which is a shock like to your system, like, oh good, it's just a dream, and then Pike stabbing at the end, like it's this exact same place in chest, exact same scene, like they basically just took it out of the dream and made it in real life.
Yeah.
So I think they did a beautiful job with it, and I really liked the song. Like it was probably I love the like crude songs they have going through like the kind of the shanties and ditties and stuff, but this was actually like one of the first like real nice, touching songs that they had going through.
Yeah, agreed. And I still think that the little singing of Mythcarver, Chef's Kiss.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. The angle from it, all of it was so well done. It drives me nuts that I cannot connect what it is.
I know what you're talking about though, because I felt the same thing when I saw it, and I haven't been able to like quite figure out where it's from either.
It's a fantasy thing. It's obviously it's a book, or it's not a book, but it's a movie, it's a show, it's something. But it's the tone, it's this like everything there. It's and again, it's not like that they ripped it off, but it's an homage.
Yeah.
Like they've tied this homage back to that whatever it was, and it was beautiful. Actually, it was kind of chilling. So I absolutely loved it. Do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
I do not. I think it was a good episode. I look forward to episode 7.
So do I, and I think I figured out the cocktail for episode 7.
Oh, very exciting. I know that one was one of the ones that was up in the air.
Yeah, I haven't figured out, like, I figured out what I want to do. I just have to make sure it will work, is the idea for it. Because, as I was saying, I think before you joined, episode 7, a bit of a teaser, it does have to do with some psychedelic stuff. And I can't use hallucinogens in a cocktail because it's illegal and because most elements of a hallucinogen that make you hallucinate are actually counteracted and destroyed by alcohol. So I'd have to make a non-alcoholic drink that is technically illegal if I were to make one that's going to make you hallucinate. I could use Green Dragon and add cannabis into it, high-level doses, but not everyone has access to that, and I try to make these drinks accessible, and we've already had one that had cannabis extract in it. So this one is actually going to be a trippy psychedelic effect in the drink. It is going to have some tiebacks to this drink, because there are some tiebacks from this episode to the next episode.
Yep.
And instead of having a cocktail that's going to make you hallucinate, this is a cocktail that's going to make you feel like you're hallucinating, because the cocktail is going to be misrepresentative of what it actually is.
Very cool. Okay.
So that's what we're working on with that. Now I just got to make sure that this magic is going to work.
Love it.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining me again for another episode of After the Roll. I'm really looking forward to next week. And enjoy the rest of your night, Billy. Thank you for coming through. I hope you have a fantastic week.
Thank you too.
Thanks. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Bye-bye.